Good evening. I'm Nova Blake, and this is your complete political briefing for Sunday, April 5th, 2026. Today, the United States military is searching for a missing weapons systems officer after an F-15 fighter jet is shot down over Iran, while President Trump gives Tehran a 48-hour ultimatum to open the Strait of Hormuz or face new strikes. Let's get into it. Starting with the top stories from across the American political landscape. The United States military is conducting a desperate search and rescue operation in Iran for a missing weapons systems officer after an American F-15E Strike Eagle was shot down over Iranian territory on Friday. One of the two crew members ejected safely and was rescued by United States Special Forces on Iranian soil, though the rescue helicopter was struck by small arms fire during the operation, wounding crew members aboard before landing safely. The status of the second crew member, identified as a weapons systems officer, remains unknown, and Iran has offered a reward of approximately $60,000 to any citizen who locates and hands over an American pilot. A separate American aircraft, an A-10 Thunderbolt attack plane known as the Warthog, was also struck by Iranian air defenses on Friday in a second incident near the Strait of Hormuz. The pilot successfully navigated the damaged aircraft out of Iranian territory before ejecting into Kuwaiti airspace, where he was safely recovered. Two additional Black Hawk search and rescue helicopters involved in recovery operations were also struck by Iranian fire, though their crews were unharmed and all aircraft landed safely. The incidents represent the most significant single-day loss of American military hardware since Operation Epic Fury began 35 days ago. President Trump issued a fresh 48-hour ultimatum to Iran on Saturday morning, posting on Truth Social. That time is running out and threatening to bring all hell down on Tehran if the Strait of Hormuz is not reopened or a peace deal is not reached. The deadline is linked to a previous April 6th cutoff the president had already extended twice. Iran's parliamentary speaker Mohammad Bakr Ghalibaf publicly mocked the search for the missing American crew member, calling the operation a sign of what he termed the war's lack of strategy. The United Nations Security Council voted today on a revised Bahraini resolution aimed at restoring commercial shipping through the Strait of Hormuz. The original draft, which called for authorizing all necessary measures to secure the waterway, was scaled back after opposition from China and Russia to language allowing only defensive measures after both countries threatened a veto. The revised measure represents the international community's most formal collective response yet to Iran's blockade of the world's most critical oil shipping lane. 23 Democratic states and the District of Columbia filed a major federal lawsuit Friday seeking to block President Trump's mail-in voting executive order signed just days ago. The coalition, led by California Attorney General Rob Bonta and including Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, filed the suit in the United States District Court in Massachusetts, arguing the order unconstitutionally strips states of their power to administer their own elections. The lawsuit is now the fourth legal challenge filed against the order since it was signed Tuesday, joining suits by congressional Democrats, voting rights groups, and the League of Women Voters. Public support for the Iran war is continuing to erode, according to a new poll released Friday. A new Reuters and Ipsos survey found that 86% of Americans are concerned for the lives of United States military personnel in Iran, and 56% believe the war will have a significant negative impact on the American economy. The downing of the F-15 and the failed rescue helicopter mission are expected to sharpen that concern further heading into the week when Congress returns from its 2-week Easter recess. The movement in Congress to force a war powers vote on Iran is accelerating. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries said Democrats are determined to win the next war powers resolution when lawmakers return to Washington after recess, noting that several Democrats who previously voted against such resolutions have now switched positions after rising gas prices, military casualties, and the administration's shifting explanations for the war's objectives. The next House War Powers vote is expected within days of Congress reconvening the week of April 13th. The Department of Homeland Security shutdown, now in its 49th day and the longest agency funding lapse in American history, remains unresolved with both chambers of Congress on Easter recess. Please subscribe this channel for daily morning news bulletin. Let's dive back. President Trump has pledged to sign an executive order directing payment of all DHS employees using existing authority, bypassing Congress as the standoff drags on. House Republicans and Senate Democrats remain deadlocked over whether to include funding for immigration and customs enforcement in any final agreement. A new Reuters and Ipsos poll found that Trump's approval rating has sunk to the lowest point of his second term. The poll's results, released this week, showed the president's numbers falling as gas prices top $4 a gallon nationally, hitting $4.10 on Friday, according to the American Automobile Association, a 12-cent jump in just 1 week. The combination of rising fuel costs, an unresolved war, a prolonged government shutdown, and the downing of an American fighter jet is shaping up as a significant liability for Republicans heading into November's midterm elections. The conservative Catholic archbishop serving as head of the Archdiocese for the Military Services, Timothy Broglio, publicly stated Friday that he believes the war in Iran does not meet the standard of a just war under Catholic doctrine. In an interview ahead of a scheduled Sunday broadcast appearance, Broglio said it is hard to cast this war as something sponsored by the Lord, and responded to a direct question about whether the conflict was justified by saying he did not believe it met the threshold under just war theory. His remarks come after Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth was widely criticized for asking service members to pray for a military victory in Iran in the name of Jesus Christ. Now turning to Washington and the latest actions from the current administration, here are 10 significant developments from the administration this week. President Trump's proposed fiscal year 2027 budget, released Friday, requests $1.5 trillion in defense spending, a 42% increase over the current year and the largest Pentagon budget in American history. The proposal would deliver a 5 to 7% pay raise to all military personnel, fund the president's Golden Dome missile defense system at $185 billion, and begin rebuilding weapons stockpiles depleted by the Iran campaign. Simultaneously, the budget proposes $73 billion in cuts to non-defense domestic programs. The White House's 2027 budget also requests $152 million to fund the first year of costs to reopen Alcatraz Island as what it called a state-of-the-art secure prison facility. The budget documents describe the proposal as part of a broader $5 billion investment in the Bureau of Prisons to ensure competitive pay, safe working conditions, and an end to correctional officer shortages. The administration has previously floated Alcatraz as a high-profile detention site, and the budget request formally puts that plan before Congress for the first time. The Trump administration's budget proposal calls for slashing Environmental Protection Agency environmental justice programs, cutting more than $15 billion in Department of Energy clean energy grants, reducing the Internal Revenue Service budget by $1.4 billion, and continuing what the White House describes as the path to elimination of the Department of Education. Non-defense programs targeted for cuts also include agriculture spending, down 19%, and the Low-Income Home Energy Assistance Program. Democrats and advocacy groups said the proposals would devastate working families during a period of rising costs driven by the Iran war. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth signed a memorandum Friday lifting the long-standing Pentagon ban on service members carrying personal firearms on United States military installations. The directive tells base commanders to presume approval when troops request permission to carry privately owned firearms for personal protection off-duty, reversing a policy in place since 1992. Hegseth cited recent on-base shootings, including incidents at Fort Stewart in Georgia, Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico, and Naval Air Station Pensacola in Florida. The Department of Justice's Office of Legal Counsel concluded this week that the 1978 Presidential Records Act, which requires presidents to preserve official documents and hand them over to the National Archives, is unconstitutional. The opinion, authored by Assistant Attorney General T. Elliott Gaser, argues that Congress cannot compel the executive branch to hand over presidential papers, and that voluntary accommodation between the branches is all that is historically required. The opinion does not carry the force of law, but gives the administration a legal basis to resist congressional and archival oversight of its records. Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche stated publicly this week that the Jeffrey Epstein files matter should not be part of anything going forward at the Department of Justice, signaling a complete departure from his predecessor Pam Bondi's troubled tenure managing the Epstein document releases. Blanche made the statement on national television just hours after being named acting attorney general, following Bondi's firing. However, the House Oversight Committee, led by both Democrats and Republicans, said the Department of Justice must still cooperate with the subpoena issued to Bondi and the ongoing congressional investigation. President Trump signed an executive order Friday aimed at reforming college athletics, directing federal agencies to evaluate whether universities that violate governing body rules on transfers, eligibility, and athlete compensation should be considered unfit for federal grants and contracts. The order establishes a 5-year maximum athletic eligibility window, limits undergraduates to 1 transfer without a waiting period, and calls for the governing body to create a national registry of student athletes. The order takes effect August 1, 2026, giving schools roughly 4 months to comply or risk losing federal funding. The Trump administration's proposed 2027 budget includes a request for 100,000 adult immigration detention beds and 30,000 family immigration detention beds, a significant expansion of the Department of Homeland Security's detention capacity under the federal reconciliation process. The budget maintains immigration and customs enforcement funding at current 2026 levels and calls for completing construction of the southern border wall. Both items are designated for passage through the Senate reconciliation process, bypassing the need for Democratic votes. The administration doubled its reinsurance guarantee program for commercial ships willing to transit the Strait of Hormuz, increasing United States backing from $20 billion to $40 billion for vessels willing to attempt passage through the waterway. The move is designed to encourage commercial shipping companies to resume transit through the critical waterway, which has been effectively closed since the start of the war. Despite the expanded guarantees, maritime traffic through the strait has remained near zero as ship owners assess the risk of Iranian military action. A federal judge denied the Justice Department's request to reconsider his decision quashing a pair of grand jury subpoenas issued to the Federal Reserve and Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell. The judge rejected the administration's arguments in a ruling that further complicates the administration's ongoing public feud with the nation's central bank. President Trump has repeatedly and publicly criticized Powell, and the failed attempt to subpoena the Fed adds another federal court defeat to the administration's mounting list of legal setbacks this week. That's your full briefing for Saturday, April 5th, 2026. I'm Nova Blake. Stay informed, stay ahead. We'll see you next time.